Two people from belong to two peer educators. Firstly, Andy Mannion, and then so as not to have to come back, I'll introduce a colleague, Amy Ahern, who'll speak after Andy.
My name's Andy, if you didn't already hear, and I'm a facilitator with Belong To, and I try to think about what I'd talk about today. Like, there's so much, because I'm going to talk about being LGBT, but more specifically T in Ireland, and being a young T person or trans person in Ireland. And there's so much, like, I could go on here all day, but I'm sure you have homes to get to. So I've tried to be as concise as I can. But just for me, it's like growing up from a very young age, I've always known that I was different. I didn't necessarily know why or how I was different. I just knew. And but like even still today, I still live my life feeling different in some ways. And I see my friends and peers that they live their life feeling different too, and they don't necessarily know why either. They don't know whether it's from society or whether it's what they genuinely feel, and many different things result from that. Many different things affect young trans people, and the biggest one that most people can think of anyway in an Irish context is the lack of proper gender recognition legislation. That's very hard for me to say, but it is. And you know, it affects all sectors of people's lives, not being able to be recognised for who you are, from people as something as simple as mispronouncing you, or not allowing you doing something that you should be allowed to do or wear or anything like that. And I know we keep talking about it, but it's where most young people spend a lot of their lives, but in school. That can be a very difficult time for a lot of trans young people. And in an Irish context, like schools are gender segregated quite a lot. There's boys and girls schools, but not only that, there's even some subjects are considered gendered. For example, home economics or metalwork and that sort of thing. Like I wasn't allowed to do woodwork, and my parents wouldn't let me. Or I have a close friend who was bullied out of his home economics class because he was the only boy in that class, and he's now a chef, so he doesn't care. But like at the time, he was very upset because it was the one subject that he really was interested in doing, because he wanted to be a chef, obviously. So yeah, and then things like you can get specific grants if you're a female engineer and all that sort of stuff, and getting into specific courses and fill up quotas and stuff. So like it is, people underestimate like how important being, like having your identity in school can be, and how you can be painted with a brush just because you are of a certain gender. And another big thing in schools is uniforms, and how that can have such a huge impact on a trans person. And like I know someone who they were so anxious about the fact that they had to wear a skirt into school every day that they just stopped going to school. And they fought for a very, very long time to be able to wear the school's trousers. And they're still not allowed, but they're allowed to wear the school tracksuit. And in exam levels in the school, you don't actually do PE. And so they are being segregated automatically, being like, they stand out automatically by the fact that they have to wear PE gear where everyone else is in a school uniform. Like they can't, like, it's just ridiculous. But, it all comes down to like one's own person's self-esteem and things like that, like, and confidence within yourself, and it causes people to drop out because they are so anxious to go back. I know I dropped out. Like, trans stuff was only a part of it. Like there was so much more, but like it was a part of it. And I know someone who has done 3 different college degrees now and has had to drop out each time because of the difficulties they've had of not being seen as themselves. And another big issue was always PE and being like told you can't change here, and being bullied and all that sort of stuff. And it all stems down to lack of education and awareness, in my opinion, that teachers don't know how to handle this, other young people don't know how to handle this, but it's not necessarily their fault. They're just not. They're not told these people. They're not even told trans people exist, let alone the terminology or the serious issues that affect trans people and the stuff you read in the booklets. Like when I was coming out, I had to tell people what trans meant as well as like how I identify. So it's difficult enough having to come out and then have to explain what you're coming out as. And then that progresses on to how employment affects you in the future. Like if you drop out of school, it's obviously more difficult to get employment. But if you're young, you're at higher risk of being unemployed. If you're LGBT, you're at higher risk of being employed. So if you're LGBT and young, you're pretty much screwed. But and then uniforms happen in the workplace as well. But the difference between in a workplace is that it's like illegal to force someone to wear a gendered uniform, whereas in schools, for some reason, it's completely fine to force someone into a gendered uniform, and there's like it's completely fine, like which makes absolutely no sense. But a big thing that crosses over in workplaces and in schools is bullying. It happens in both places. People tend to forget it happens in employment as well. But I think with transphobia and homophobia, it stems from the same thing, basic sexism and gender stereotypes and that sort of thing. And that we need to just remember that, we're all going through the same fight, even though like there is a place for being T and being LGB and all the different things and communities that come with that, but that where at the end of the day, it is a similar fight. But that also that people aren't born homophobic or transphobic and so on, that it is learned. Like I teach creative writing for an organisation that from 6-year-olds to 17-year-olds, and I don't have it that hard. But every now and again, I have a young, like a child, maybe around 6 or 7, ask me if I'm a boy or a girl, and that sort of thing. But then the older children tend to say more negative things to me. They use the words that we all associate with homophobia and transphobia, that you can see that throughout the years of not being told what they're saying is wrong and not being taught why they're saying it is wrong. You can see the effect that has on them. Like working with these young people is actually like reading like loads of psychological pamphlets and behaviour leaflets and stuff, and seeing like how different the age groups are. Like the older children are so self-conscious, they won't like share their ideas, their stories, and out of fear of being ridiculed for coming up with like a superhero that wants to save the damsel in distress or whatever. Whereas the young children are just crazy and talk about clowns with chainsaw faces and stuff, and it's like it just shows like they're just so like reluctant because of the fact that society has pressurized them to be so insecure about themselves, and which again comes from like lack of awareness and education and affecting self-esteem and all that sort of things. Like it's all interconnected, and I think it all. And another thing that affects all this as well, and LGBT young people, is lack of services, lack of people being, in search for a better term, experts on, psychology and stuff, being experts on the issues and gender therapy and all that sort of stuff, as well as like. There's only like one trans youth group in the country, and even though it's great and there are other LGBT groups, there's still only one space that's specifically for trans young people, and there's only one group for parents of trans young people as well, which isn't even in Dublin, which means it's harder to even travel to. But with the lack of supports as well, and specifically related to young people, the cost of travelling in Ireland is ridiculous. I'm sure you all know, having to get here today, for starters, and the cost of actually accessing these services as well. And due to the fact that there's so little options, you tend to have to maybe pay premium prices for these options. And another big thing is lack of parental support and not being able to access these services because parents might not necessarily support that young person, and so refuse them to allow to access these services. But also another major thing that affects this sort of area is the fact of consent or not being able to access legislation. And there is, I know like it's a very important issue, the forced divorce and all that sort of stuff, but everyone keeps forgetting to talk about the fact that there is a minimum age on the proposed legislation for gender recognition legislation in this country. And like the minimum age will be 18, and that people need to remember that people know from very, very young, and that it should come down to self-determination, and that medical consent to surgeries and stuff is completely different to, knowing who you are and being able to recognise as male or female or whatever that may be in school and so on, and on your birth certificates and passports and everything. And then I just want to finish on that. At the end of the day, it all comes down to like the hope. There actually is a lot of hope and resilience in the community. Like I've been in individuality for 3 years now or so, and in that time it has changed so much. Like not only the numbers, like it's gone for 2 or 3 people to 8 or more, and there's loads of different people every week and everything. And I think the biggest thing is what it really does for young people, what it did for me. Like I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for belong to or individuality. I wouldn't be alive either, but I don't want to bring the mood down, but it changes people's lives. And I know we talk so much about school and the health system and stuff with trans stuff, but people, at the end of the day, young people spend so much time with their friends. They need the social output as well as the sport, but they need the social interaction. And to actually, I never met trans people before I went to belong to or individuality, and I thought I was the only one, and I thought I was a freak and all that sort of stuff, and it really does help. And at the end of the day, the whole point of being trans is to be able to express who you are and not to conform to labels or all this ridiculous terminology or to gender stereotypes or whatever. It really is just to be able to express who you are and what you are and everything, and that we just think we need to remember that, and that we all should just remember that these people are our friends and our children and our parents and everything, and just not to forget that we're not statistics, that we are people too. So thanks.